Greetings from the Blessed Michael McGivney Pilgrimage Center in New Haven, Connecticut, and thank you for your interest. Thank you for joining us for this this online program today with Bobby Martin. Before I get more into an introduction of Bobby, our guest, allow me to share a few details for the benefit of all of you viewing live. There's a utility on the side of your screen near the margin where you can submit written questions. So if there's a question that's prompted as part of our conversation, feel free to use that question mark utility and drop a question in there. We'll try to work it in the course of our conversation. The session should probably last about 45 minutes, and you know that includes perhaps the question and answer portion. There's also a utility for you to download an information sheet. Bobby has provided us with some links to his websites and some other articles of interest about his background, so you're welcome to download that and enjoy some more information about Bobby and his work. Today is July 12th, 2023, and I'm saying that because this is a session that's being recorded, and it'll be available for view on the Blessed Michael McGivney Center's YouTube channel. And for those of you who are viewing, or those of you, anyone who's registered will receive an email message thanking you for your interest and giving you a link to that site so that you can enjoy the video and share it with others. So on to the show, as they say. My guest today is Mr. Bobby C. Martin. Bobby is an artist whose work is featured here in the McGivney Center's featured exhibition, Altars of Reconciliation. And the show is on display here through August 13th, 2023. So just about a month. Bobby is a Christian gentleman. He is of Native American ancestry. And the exhibit, which he curated in collaboration with his two fellow artists, centers on the embrace of Christianity among Indigenous American people. And as I've said in the past two presentations, some see that as a bit of a contradiction, the acceptance by Native Americans of the faith introduced in the United States by the European settlers and colonists that didn't show the Native Americans the warmest of concern. So this is a theme that Bobby and his fellow artists seek to address. Bobby, so very grateful for your willingness to join us, and even more so for your willingness to curate this show, which has been very welcome here.
I'm glad to hear that, Peter. Thanks for the invitation. And we've been really happy to have the show travel around the country and be seen in audiences that wouldn't have normally been able to see this work. So we're thankful.
Oh, truly grateful. So tell us a little bit about your own background, about your heritage. Tell us about how you embraced art as a profession.
Yeah, I've had a very long and winding road, I guess, as probably many of us have. But
I get the Beatles reference. I'm not sure everybody does. But.
Well, I grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the northeast corner of Oklahoma. It's the capital of the Cherokee Nation. I myself am not Cherokee. I'm a citizen of the Muscogee Creek Nation. Creeks and Cherokees didn't get along that well, but now they do pretty much that okay. But so anyway, I grew up there wanting to be a rock star, actually, playing music. And that's, I dabbled in art, but really wasn't anything that I was that interested in. But I was really interested in music. So started playing didn't grow up in any kind of Christian home. Well, I would say nominal, actually. We would, my parents would drop us off at VBS in the summers, and, we'd go on Christmas and Easter. But, it wasn't, I didn't grow up learning anything. I didn't grow up Christian, although I had the background. I had a lot of like the lady's face you see right there is my granny. She was very much a follower of Christ and raised her kids. My mom in a native Baptist church, but I grew up wanting to be a rock and roller. I played guitar, was playing in bar bands before I was old enough to be in bars, and ultimately ended up being a professional musician until I was in my late 20s. Had a recording studio there in Tahlequah for a bit, but the rock star career never materialized. So at some point, decided to swap the starving musician for a starving artist. Um, but how that happened was interesting because it was all tied into. So I was playing in a band with our lead singer, who was this wonderful, beautiful woman who ended up falling in love with, and we broke up the band by falling in love, but we gained not only each other, but we gained a faith in Christ through all this. God uses it's a long, long story. Maybe sometime I'll write it down and share it. But it was just enough to say that God used our brokenness in our trying to be musicians in a fallen world to somehow through the Holy Spirit bring us to Him. And not only bring us to Him as followers of Christ, but bring us together ultimately as man and wife. And so that was 33 years ago, and we're still we're actually now on staff at our church as worship leaders. So the music career still continues to some extent, but somewhere along there, when we first met and the band broke up, it was like, this whole I'm not make I need to find something else to do because the music is just not doing it. So I decided to go back to school. I went back. I had dropped out many years earlier to try this, be a rock star, and went back to school. Went back to undergrad in my late 20s. Graduated with an undergrad degree in fine art and in what they call Indian studies. Then this has been the late 80s, early 90s. Now it's renamed to, I think it's just called Native Studies now. And so from there, I decided, well, I'm already in my early 30s. If I'm going to continue to do this, if I'm going to ever go to grad school, I'm going to go on. So I ended up actually going on to grad school at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Got my MFA in painting and printmaking in 1995, and was fortunate enough to get a fellowship through a college art association that actually was designed to be a bridge between grad school and your first job out of grad school, and ended up going to work for Gilcrease Museum, which is a museum, history and art museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with this really cool title of artist in residence. What that actually meant was I was the one-person graphic design department, made all their signage and stuff, I love the job. It was a great job. Still one of my favorite jobs ever. Worked there for 5 years. And then somehow fell into, there was a job opening at the school that I used to teach, or that I used to just graduated from in Tahlequah, that was looking for a graphic design professor, which I'd never been a classroom teacher, but I thought, well, it's in Tahlequah. I don't have to drive back and forth to Tulsa every day, so I think I'll apply. And somehow God opened the doors for that to get that job, and that was in 2000. So I've been teaching now at the college level for 22 years. And in the meantime, though, the art career has just kind of, there's no better way to have a day job as an art professor to be able to still continue an art career. And I try and convince my students of that all the time. Is like, you've got summers free to work on your work. I've been thankful to be able to curate shows and work on my own art, and I have a nice studio here now. Actually, just built a brand new studio out back here in a little middle of nowhere piece of property in northeast Oklahoma. So yeah, God has been amazingly merciful and kind to bless me with the ability to make a living. Since the rock star thing, the music thing didn't quite work out. The art thing, it hasn't. I'm not a rock star as an artist for sure by any means, but I've been able to make a great career and living, and have an art practice that actually is I'm doing more now in my art career, my art practice than I've ever done. So that's just been, this last few years have just been really fruitful for me, and not anything that I can take credit for either. So I'm very thankful for that.
Well, I'm delighted that you were attuned to the Spirit, as you say, and you know, allowed for that guidance. It seems as though it's been the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bobby, I spent a little time this afternoon in preparation for our conversation, just in the gallery and looking at your work and reading over your introduction, and I was struck because you begin your introduction about yourself in the gallery. Citing a line from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, where he talks all about reconciliation, man's reconciliation with God, and presumably man's reconciliation with himself. And of course, the title of the show, as I cited earlier, is Altars of Reconciliation. So your theme in trying to bridge, if you will, the hardships that Native Americans faced at the hands of European settlers. Um, not not something that you personally experienced, but certainly something that you know has been with your family, has been with uh, people of Native American ancestry. Um, what is it that prompted you to follow this? I'm going to call it maybe inspiration. And you know, it seems like you've got this understanding that you know the cross transcends all, and it really, even whatever wrongs of human history, even Christians against other Christians.
Yeah, that's a great question, and because it's the heart of why the three of us even started talking about doing a show like this, is because we felt like there's such a tradition, really, and a heritage of Christianity among Native peoples that's really a lot of, probably most people aren't aware of. You know, yes, there's these historically horrible events and mistreatments and even going far as to say genocide amongst Native people, but yet in all of that, there's a very strong history and tradition of Christ followers, of Christians among Native people, and I've often wondered why would people that were totally, you know, mistreated have anything to do with the religion of the people that brought that on them? But it's become clear to me over time, and I think that was something that was clear to Tony and to Aaron and I, that this is a story that somehow we needed to tell, because we grew up in this, even though we all three had very different experiences in the church and as Christians, we all come from that same background and heritage of Christians and Native people in ways that I think a lot of other people, especially outside the Native world, aren't familiar with. And it's like, we just feel like it was a story, you know, a history that had to be told. We had all been doing art, but nothing specifically around, you know, circling around Christianity, or our experience of faith. But it just felt like, as more we talked about it, I mean, we'd been talking about doing the show like this for 8 or 9 years, and it took us a good 5 or 6 years of that to finally God to work enough in us to say, okay, you guys can't get out of this. You've got to put the show together. And Tony came up with the title because originally we were going to do all our own personal versions of altar pieces. It sort of morphed a little bit from that, but the idea was still about what can we offer back to God. And then part of the altars of reconciliation is not about, I don't think any of us would ever be presumptuous enough to think that we could reconcile, you know, any Native Americans or any group of ethnic people at all with each other, or even with God. It's really about our own reconciliation with God and how that played into our creative lives, and also how it played into the history that we've lived through. So the altars of reconciliation really is a very personal thing, but we thought our personal stories were important enough in ways that a lot of people weren't familiar with, to tell that story about this, as you mentioned, the transcendence of Christianity over, you know, over these horrible experiences. You know, Genesis 50:20 is always one of my go-to verses. Is, you know, what you meant for evil, what men meant for evil, God meant for good. To preserve all these people you see here today, you know, and Joseph's brothers, or my family. How
Hmm.
we might see that. So to me, it's like it was an important story that we felt like we needed to tell. And when we did it, we decided we only had like a couple of venues. One was at JBU when we first started, and then there was another venue that we had available. And it was like, well, God, we've got a couple of places to show this. You use it however you want to. And that was in 2016, 2017 or so. And then the show has now, you know, we're getting the opportunity. God is using the show to be able to travel around the country in ways that we never could have probably planned that at all. So I'm just thankful that God has worked as He always does in unexpected ways, and we just sort of tried to make, you know, whatever effort we could to do this, to do the best we could with the stories. And thankfully, you know, it's at a place like, you know, the Pilgrimage Center that people can see it and hope can get an insight into how transcendent Christianity or following Christ and just the story of Christ is over really everything. Everything.
True, true indeed. I'm going to advance the slides here, and I want to get into some of the art specifically. But one of the distinctions about the show is that all three of you have very unique expressions in art, and yours is very intriguing because you're working in some very distinct mediums, and so a lot of the art that we're going to show is similar, but it's each piece is very compelling. So tell us a little bit about this charcoal and gold leaf technique that you use, and a little bit about this piece in particular.
Yeah, this is my mom, Bonnie Martin, an incredible woman who really just probably had more to do in shaping me as a person than anybody. Um, but the whole idea, this is very, I mean, I've used my family photographs for almost 30 years now, and because they're just it's something that I've always, well, when I first started using them, it was like, well, I'll just use, these are great old pictures, and they're, I'm just thankful that a lot of this survived, these old photos survived, these little artifacts that are pictures from my past. But the more I've shown them, the more I've realized and talked to people that they can represent anybody's mom, they could represent anybody's family in ways that I hadn't really anticipated. I was just thinking, oh, well, these are interesting photos. They're great subject matter. But as I've developed the, over the years, this use of these images, in fact, I was talking to a collector just yesterday that got actually this print right here. It's getting ready to be shipped out, which is also my mom. I call it Hollywood Indian because she looks like a starlet from the 50s. But anyway, the reason they were attracted to the piece is because it reminded them of their own mothers. And so to me, it's become a way to communicate universal truths through family and through people. They just happen to be my family and my people. What's different about this that I haven't ever used before in anything was the gold leaf in these images. And I wanted to be a contrast just between what would look like a quick sketch, which is really what they are. They're just kind of quick. I wanted them to be very sketchy. I didn't want them to be very real super finished portraits or drawings or photographically faithful necessarily. I just wanted to show more the human hand. You know, my drawing is not about, it's more I don't know, something more immediate about it, but also to bring this, I don't know, you can't use gold leaf without thinking about sacredness. I don't know why we're trained to think somehow, you know, through like the churches we saw in Europe this summer and places like that. We sort of know that when you see gold leaf, there's some reason that the gold leaf is there. And to me, it's not that I'm trying to turn and the other thing that like Russian icons and things like this where they're just these small little sort of pieces that help you to, get closer to God. I'm not idolizing these people by any means, but they are icons for me that remind me of my own background and my own training and my own history. So the gold leaf is just a way to be able to hopefully bring them honor and bring them some kind of a sacredness, not an idol sacredness, but a sacredness of their importance to me personally.
You know, it's interesting because listening to you, and you made mention of the fact that these were taken from photographs. I recall one of my college professors. Now, I didn't study art; I studied philosophy. But he asked a question in class, and your explanation prompted this memory. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was something to the effect of, "What's more real, a photograph of a person or an artwork of the same person?" And most of the class, myself included, obviously said a photograph. And he said,
Hmm.
think about this. He said, a photograph captures a person at an instant in time. He said, where a work of art can really depict an individual's complete essence.
Hmm.
Now, again, a philosophy professor would think like that, but it prompted me to think about that in what you were saying and how you were describing these images. And it really does, in a sense, because you said this is your mom. The subject of this piece of art is your mom, but it has broader appeal, and it could be, as you say, somebody else's mom, because there's that essence of a nurturing person, a caring person, that is conveyed in your art.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, even though I base a lot of my work on photos, the photos are just, I guess, in some ways to channel to those people, and they're collaborative pieces too. I feel like, I mean, my dad took this photo when him and my mom were stationed in Germany right before I was born, and so in some ways, I feel like I'm a collaborator with my family, even though obviously they didn't know that at the time. But now I'm being able to use these images that have survived in my family to be able to give them new life and take them into hopefully directions that people wouldn't expect. Mainly because I mean, when I was first getting into art, there was a real kind of a expectation of what Native American art or Indian art back then would have been called was going to look like. And I had no connection with buffaloes or teepees or men on horseback with bows and arrows. It was just, I mean, I appreciate a lot of that traditional art, still do, but it wasn't anything that I grew up in. I had no connection with that. But I had this amazing collection of these photographs of these native people. But the native people were all doing things that everybody else did. And so to me, it made perfect sense to say, yes, native people are not these Hollywood stereotypes that everybody sees. They're just normal, everyday folks that pose in front of their cars, that are cooking, that are doing whatever, And to me, that maybe it was just a way I wanted to be able to humanize and show the universal nature of people, not to minimize the fact that, I mean, I'm super proud that I grew up in a native home, and have that heritage that's part of my DNA. But I also want to be able to show that there's that transcendence, that we all are part of.
Absolutely. Well, stereotypes certainly live. But let's have a look at this. This is a great shot. I just love the little kid in this shot.
Well, that's me. That's me at probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. In fact, I was probably there. This is my mama. This is my dad's mom. She was not Native American, but she was probably one of my, I don't know if I'd call it a role model, but at least one of my spiritual mentors. at that age, because in the summer times our parents would take us down there during VBS, and so we'd
Mhm.
stay a
Sure.
week of VBS and maybe a week after or so with Mama and Papa. Um, and so it was just part of this was really trying to give honor to these spiritual forebears of mine, whether they were native or not. In this case, Mama was not. Jewel was her name, Jewel Martin. She was on the Martin side. Um, but it was just it was something that felt like, and they almost all of them, this happened to be women. And I don't know, I listened to Erin's uh, podcast on this, the webinar that she did, and was talking about the strong women that kind of shaped her life as a woman. In my case, it was all these strong women shaped my life as a man, which is, not that I didn't have any strong men, but the believers, at least the ones that I really knew in my life, were all these amazing women that sort of well, they nurtured everyone, but they especially nurtured me growing up. And I just felt that it was very fitting, and just doing a show like this, just felt like I needed to show the amazing parts they had to play in my life.
I understand. One of the things that I found really edifying about your art is that you've related a lot of experiences about your younger life, your upbringing, your heritage, your formation, if you will, as a human being, as a Christian. But the manner in which you've chosen to relate it is through the depiction of others, of other human beings. And I find that very edifying, because it tells me that these experiences, these things that you've enjoyed, these things that you hold dear, are all the products of other people who
Mhm.
have helped to shape your life, and you're giving them honor. You're expressing what you've learned,
Mhm.
how you've developed in gratitude for what they've given you.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I appreciate you saying that, because it is true. And my wife has said this multiple times. We all stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. And I I would not be anywhere close to where I am without having those kinds of shoulders to stand on. And so I think that's part of this, being able to give credit where credit is due. Um, and so I hope it's edifying. I mean, to me, they've certainly edified me. So, and I want to be able to somehow share those experiences, and for this show especially, share how those experiences shaped my spiritual life.
Yep, they've accomplished that. The manner in which you have offered the certain works that are here, really harmonize and help to give meaning to the importance of family and heritage that seems to be very consistent among Native American peoples. Tell us
Right.
about this piece.
This is Aunt Inez, which was my mom's older sister, kind of helped raise her. She was about 10 years older than my mom, but she was um, she was sort of the rock of the family, in my memory anyway, because my granny, who was a big part of my life, but she passed away when I was probably 14 or 15, so I didn't know her as well as I knew my Aunt Inez, who was the one where at all the family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas, that's where we all went to Inez's house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember just the family gatherings with everybody around. I remember the food, which is incredible. Um, and just her nurturing spirit, it was just really something that still stays with me today. Is just the way that she made time and room for everybody, whether they were the littlest crying baby or the crankiest husband or whatever. So she was somebody that really remained kind of a spiritual rock, even though our family moved away from kind of the old home place in Oklahoma. She was still the person in the place that we went back to, that we returned to. You talk about the old home place, she was the old home place. And so even though we moved away, and really when we moved away, we not only moved away from family, we really, I think I was elementary, probably 5 or 6 years old when we moved away. We still went back, but we also, when we moved away from family, we also, for whatever reason, and I don't know, I've never really known from my parents, but we also moved away from any church or faith too. So that was a period of time where it was Aunt Inez was kind of that rock.
I love her expression because I see in it kind of a combination of real strength, muted a little with some gentleness. It's
Mhm.
it's a very endearing expression.
And it's interesting too, because a lot of this just comes through in the photos. I don't really, I don't try and copy the photos, but I don't really change much of people's expressions or anything. I've just been, it's been amazing to me that have, and actually Inez was one of the major ones that took, literally hundreds of pictures. We had 2 or 3 real shutterbugs in the family that really give me this amazing breadth and depth of material to work with. I know, I've seen pictures of them. They probably all walk around with those little brownie cameras at their waist, to take the pictures. And it's just, and I didn't know this when I first started using this imagery. I just thought, well, there's some cool pictures I found in my mom's, in a cigar box or something. So I'm going to use them for a little while until I run out of the photos. And now it's 30 years later, and I can't get away from it. I don't want to get away from it.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. This is a great shot too. Surrounded.
Yeah, this photo, that's me in the middle, literally surrounded, with my granny on my left, on the picture's right, my mom directly behind me, and
Mm-hmm.
her sisters on either side, and that's a cousin standing next to me on the other side. My brother lurking on the background on the porch back there, trying to see what's going on. This is taken at a church grounds where our family grew up in. In fact, my granny's dad, my great grandfather, was the preacher there. He was full blood Muscogee Creek. Didn't speak any English. He preached all his sermons in Muskogee language. They sang all the hymns in Muskogee. But around the church house itself were these little structures, and we call them camp houses. And they were just little, small little structures where the food was prepared, or if visitors came in, they would put them up for the weekend. Our family, the Heron family, had their own camp house, and so this was why that's called that. That was out in front of the camp house. And I didn't know this picture even existed until about 3 or 4 years ago, and because with the cousins and the remaining aunts and uncles would all get together for a Christmas reunion kind of get together. And every time we got together, after quite a few years of knowing that I was, using these images as to make paintings and drawings and things with, they would show up and they would come up with a new batch of photos that I'd never seen before. And this is one that I had a cousin just pull this out and said, "Have you seen this picture before?" It's like, when I looked at it, my jaw just dropped, because it's like, when I saw that, that was like the embodiment, the physical embodiment of what I felt like growing up. Actually standing in the middle of all these amazing women. When I saw that picture, it's like, oh, wow. How come I've never seen this photo before? And to me, that is just, it's proof of God at work, because he just brings these things to your attention that you didn't even know existed until exactly the right time. And so
And it
anyway,
prompted that thought that you had about how you felt surrounded by good
Mhm.
example and caring people. I love how you use the gold leaf here too. It's a really distinct way in which you've done so.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted there to be, the gold leaf to be a part of the image, but not be something that really draws attention to any certain person necessarily. It's just something about trying to, oh, you know,
Accent or embellish somehow.
accent embellish, and bring that sort of an idea of the importance of this sacredness of the event or the place or the person,
Hmm.
and again in ways that's not trying to be some kind of an idol, but in ways that bring them the honor that's due them. And so this photo actually, when I saw this actually really that was about the time we were really trying to formulate this idea of altars of reconciliation. And when I saw this really was probably the trigger that made me decide to do this whole series. Because I'd never really done a series anywhere close to this. I mean, I'm still using this photos, but in this style of the sketching style with the gold leaf. And I purposefully used this mulberry paper, this Asian kind of paper with all these fibers in it that actually makes it a lot harder to draw on because it's so rough.
I
And
can
so,
see the texture is very evident.
and then really the texture really jumps out when you put the gold leaf on it, but it also makes it kind of tricky and difficult to draw on because it's not like most people draw on a super smooth sheet of paper because, your pencil or your charcoal goes where you want it to. There's something about drawing on this mulberry paper that required me to give up some control. And I was okay with that. And that's one reason why I want it to be really more sketchy. I want it to be more of an impression than a very specific in its realism. I wanted to feel more immediate is really what I was going for. That more of immediacy of the sketch rather than a very finished drawing.
Well, who's this gentleman? He looks very distinguished.
He's the gentleman I just mentioned who was the preacher, the Reverend Willie Carr. He was
Full-blood
a
Muskogee.
Yeah, full-blood Muscogee. Didn't speak. He spoke a few words of English. I knew him when he passed away when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. So I really didn't. I just have vague memories of him, but I have a lot of stories relating to him that are that I treasure. He apparently pretty irascible, sort of cranky guy, but he was also, the patriarch of. He was been born in the 1870s, not too long after the Civil War. So within his memory, or in his generation, a couple of generations for that, removal would have happened. So, I've got photographs that aren't that far removed from all this history that we're talking about.
Hmm.
So you think about that, it's not that far in the past. It's not
No,
like it's
not for him. Yeah.
some ancient history. Um, he was a circuit riding Baptist preacher. Um, rode on horseback and then later I think on a wagon to a circuit of 4 or 5 different Baptist churches in a 40-50 mile radius. But he was the main preacher, reverend at the Deep Fork Hallubby church grounds, which actually is still active, um, which is the church grounds that the Heron family were part of. Somewhere along the line, I think after he passed away, the Heron family sort of drifted away from that particular church grounds. Um, but the church is still going and still thriving down there in the middle of Creek country. And so he was just I don't know, even though I didn't know him, I feel like I've known him just from the stories I've heard about him. Um, and he to me represents that sort of generational continuation of Christianity among Native people in
Hmm.
ways that just tell me that there's more going on to the gospel, to the good news of Christ than the the the, the negative history that can be put on it. It's a bigger story. It's a transcendent story.
You used the term irascible earlier. Maybe I'll say resolute. He looks like he's very resolute.
Okay, I'll take that.
and wizened too.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure he was.
I just love this this piece of art, but obviously again generated from a photograph. The the picture at the far end is just irreplaceable. That's beautiful.
Yeah, this is actually maybe one of the few photos that I actually took that I used. I was kind of had a little photo bug in my early teen years, so I was probably 12 or 13 when I took this photo. I don't know why. Actually, I took a photo of us of the family in prayer. I have no memory of taking the photo other than the photo exists. But yeah, that's my brother.
And you're not in it.
No, I'm not in it, but it is my family and
Yep.
my dad on the right, my mom. You can kind of sort of see her nose behind him, and my sister, and then my brother peeking up to see what. And kind of like, it's funny because it's the same kid that's in the previous one where he's peeking around the corner, seeing what's going
Sure.
on. Kind of the same deal here. So he sort of has this, kind of that kind of okay, what's going on here sort of look.
Praying but paying attention to what you're doing.
Right, right. Seeing what older brother's up to. What is he doing? And then my dad's parents on the left there, Mama and Papa. Um, it's just sort of one of those. It's very Norman Rockwellian in a way, I
It
guess.
is. That's a good way to describe it.
But it's also, it's also it's not the Pilgrims. It's a very much a family thing that's become part of our American culture, but it also is, it's a varied kinds of people that are celebrating that culture. And to me, it was like, in fact, there's this piece, a version of this piece is showing in a show in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now at a gallery or actually an art center. That's paired with a lady put together this show called Beyond the Whitewash, which is her response to growing up with ancestry that were slaveholders. And so she's trying to find her own uh, kind of resolution with her own background. So she wanted to she did this very pretty much a Rockwell dinner table Thanksgiving setup, and we made a little bit larger version of this that's in the show altar show that hangs on the wall right behind that dinner table installation to kind of bring that out, that there's American culture is it's interesting, but it is definitely a melting pot, and it's definitely a lot of stories in there that often people don't know about, or don't hear about.
Well, and again, I love the gold leaf. Grace is evident. Grace is evident in so many occasions of our lives, and this one's no different.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is the cover photo that we showed.
Mm-hmm. It's my granny, Mabel Heron.
Yep.
Mabel Carr, actually, because she was the daughter of Willie Carr. So her maiden name would have been Carr. She was, I think, Erin mentioned in her episode about the Dawes rolls, the Dawes census rolls. Granny here is the person that is on the rolls. That's our original enrollee that we all trace our heritage back to. In fact, my mom, we just lost her in 2020, but we inherited, my brother and sister and I inherited 5 acres of the original allotment land that is still, we still have family and some cousins that live on that land that was allotted to her right before statehood, in order to, the goal of the Dawes Commission or the Dawes rolls was to take a census and then allot all this land in order to so that all natives could own land individually. That then that what it did, it took the millions of acres that were settled and worked and owned by the tribe, condensed it down into a very small area owned by individuals, and then that remaining land was then opened up to settlement. That's where like the land, you hear about the land rush and all that stuff in Oklahoma. That's where a lot of that came from. But anyway, bottom line is she was the original. She was 4 years old when they did the Dawes,
Wow.
and so her number, um, which I actually have used in paintings, her roll number is the number that we have to be able to trace our lineage back to be able to not only be a Muscogee citizen but get any benefits to the tribe. I mean, I have a little ID card that shows that I'm a Muscogee citizen. So it's a reality that is still a big part of many Native people's lives.
Bobby, may I ask, when you curated this show, did you create this art for the show, or were these pieces of this series that you had done something that you just decided to include? And how many photographs have you used in this way?
With the gold leaf, you mean?
Yeah.
These were particularly, in fact, as I mentioned with that surrounded by heron ladies, that was really the piece or the idea that got me thinking about using this idea of drawings on the mulberry paper with gold leaf. And so all these pieces were done specifically for the author show. And they are quite, well, I won't say quite different, but they are a, a bit different than work I'd been doing up to this time. And so to me, it was an intentional and a departure because I wanted to be something different for this show. And that's why now since, I mean, because I never tried gold leaf before, but it's like, gold leaf, I want to try that. In fact, the first time I did the pieces because I was too afraid and cheap to use actual 24 karat gold leaf. I used some of the Hobby Lobby metal leaf, which is mostly tin and copper or something, because I was like, oh, if I mess this up, that's. But after I did a few of them, it's like, okay, I really felt convicted. It's like if I'm really giving honor and praise to these people, and I'm using imitation gold leaf. What's that saying? So I end up actually redoing several of them, getting the real deal, 24 karat gold leaf, and it is super noticeable. It's such a different. There's something you can definitely notice them when you put them side by side.
It
So anyway,
it
uh,
truly does
I
stand
wanted to be able to do something very specific and focus in on these people that were really important to me and draw attention to their spiritual role in my life.
Now tell me about these pieces. These are not in the show, but you've asked me to include these for purposes of our visit today.
Mainly, I just wanted to be able to show this is more typical of what I do, which is still using old photographs. Everything you've seen is mostly portraits, but I don't always do portraits. I have a few that are just different sort of vignettes or scenes, I guess. But that's Granny again on the left and my mom on the right. That is her actual roll number there, Mabel Carr, 9230. That's her Dawes roll number.
Wow.
Um, and in the background are maps. I've been obsessed for the last 2 or 3 years with maps because of this maps are these amazing documents that not only record places, but they record things like who's in power when they made these maps, what's the important thing to show. So they're political documents, not beyond just place making or place recording documents. And so I've really been using those a lot lately. The picture on the right is of my mom when she was probably, it's a little tiny photo that looks like it was probably taken in a little photo booth at the state fair or something. But she had such a great look on her face that I had to paint it. And this is a huge painting. This is a painting that's probably 4 by 6 feet. That was
Oh
just
boy.
recently purchased by the Muscogee Nation, my tribe. And they have they have a quite an active health services department. They just recently bought a really large hospital facility in Tulsa called Council Oak, and they purchased this painting to go in the lobby or in the entrance area of this hospital, which to me is, I was so honored I've had a lot of I've had a lot of work that's been collected by museums and shown in shows and museums and galleries. But there's something about, and my mom would love knowing this. I wish she'd still been alive when they put this up, but she would love knowing that she's in this place of healing, because she was a very nurturing, healing person herself. And so that this work is showing in a place that I'm really very, very blessed to have it in a place where, a lot of people that go in a hospital probably wouldn't be the type of person that kind of go to a museum, but they're going to go in and see all this amazing art. It's not just this painting. This whole hospital is filled with all this great art by Muscogee artists, Creek artists, and so she's got a place of honor in that facility, which I love. I love that idea that she's sort of holding court over these people that are coming in and needing healing.
Well, congratulations to you, and I agree. What a tremendous opportunity. People who would never encounter it, perhaps in an institution, a cultural institution such as a museum, can get to see it in a place of everyday life in
Yes, I
the
agree.
hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very distinctive, Mr. Martin. You got to give a little bit of explanation.
I wanted to throw that in again to show that the altar's work that I did is I'm really proud of it, but it is very different, not very different, but quite different than what I usually do. This is another departure. Bobby C. Martin, C stands for Clyde,
Mhm.
and so this is Clyde in his Godzilla mode here, because he for years he was just, and he's actually sitting over there. He's this little 2-inch tall toy that my brother and I played with at in fact, he just sort of turned up at my mom's house one day when we were visiting, just not that many years ago. So I brought him home to be my studio mascot, set on top of my etching press for several years. And at some point, I think we're in London or somewhere, and saw these little engravings of sort of like book plate illustrations of these early English explorers, of what these Native Americans look like. And it just reminded me of, okay, stereotypes have been with us for centuries. And so that was one type of stereotype. Clyde here is another type of stereotype. So I just wanted Clyde to break out, go into the wild and start, reclaiming some of that, or maybe not reclaiming, but maybe reimagining what a stereotype would do. And so in this case, he's coming into downtown Tulsa. That's why he's decolonizing, and because Tulsa actually is originally a Muscogee Creek settlement. During removal, the Creek people were removed into the Tulsa area, and this one of the early settlements. And actually, the word Tulsa means town in Creek, in Muscogee language. So Tulsa, Tulsi Town, Tallahassee, all those are Creek words meaning some form of town or settlement. And so Tulsa naturally, actually, is still part of the Muscogee Reservation due to a Supreme Court ruling a couple of years ago. So this is a little bit more, I guess you could call it a little bit more political, but it's just fun. I try and maybe make some points, but I don't want to be, I'd rather make any kind of point with a bit of humor rather than trying to be real strident and, sort of, any kind of bitterness or anger doesn't really get you very far. But, if you want to talk about things, and I think about, even with this altar show, being able to talk about ideas, because Christianity is not really that welcome in the secular art world. I'm sure you know that anyway, but there's something about being native and coming at it from a native perspective opens doors. We found this opens doors in ways that wouldn't normally be open. And the same way with this sort of political statement, I guess, say it with a little humor, and maybe it's a little, you still hopefully kind of get people thinking, but in ways that don't scare them off or say, oh, I don't want to,
What about this? Is this that hospital setting you were talking
This
about?
is the Council Oak facility. This is the entry lobby. They commissioned me to create actually the history of Council Oak, which the oak tree is an actual oak tree that's right off of downtown Tulsa, which is where a group of a tribal town group rekindled their fire immediately after removal from Alabama. They rekindled the fire, and that's what they called it Tulsi Town, and that was the beginning of Tulsa. So the history of the Council Oak tree is the history of Tulsa. And so I created this. I think it's 26 or 27 total panels. There's more of a site-specific installation. Actually, I think oh, this is an older picture too, because it's got the clock on. I actually put a limb across the fireplace connecting, because the whole idea was the limb of this council oak connects all the way back to the homeland, which is on the far right. That's a homeland. Those are some historic chiefs, pictures of chiefs on the right hand side. And then it's kind of chronological, not 100% chronological, that traces the history of the Creek people across and then to the current where we are today.
What a terrific commission.
Yeah, it was. Oh, here's the limb. You can kind of
Yep,
see that.
yep. That's
It was great.
a clever use of a real limb.
Yeah, it was the biggest project I've been able to work on up to date, and that was last year. We just installed it this past spring. In fact, they just had a nice little um, sort of a celebration of, they call it the Art of Healing celebration, that they celebrated not just the mural, but there was probably 20 or more artists that were asked to contribute work. But me and a couple of other friends of mine actually were the ones that were asked to commission pieces specifically for the hospital, which was an honor, quite an honor.
That's evident. Who's pictured with you?
That's my son. And in fact, at the bottom there, along those silhouettes at the bottom, um, you can't really see the detail of it, but starting from the right-hand side behind where my son's standing all the way to the left is 6 generations of my family, starting with Willie Carr, who you saw earlier, all the way to my son and his 4 kids. So
Wow.
6 generation of Muscogee people all standing under this council oak tree.
What a clever application. That
Well,
is
thank you.
great. Well, Bobby Martin, it's been a joy to visit with you. I can't thank you enough for the time that you've shared with us today, but also for the work that you've shared with us that people continue to enjoy here at the Blessed Michael McGivney Center. So I want to remind everyone to download the form if you haven't already from the margin of your screen, and come and see the show. If you've seen the show, encourage others to come. It's here for just a little more than a month until August 13th. Um, it's called Altars of Reconciliation, and it's a collection of art for Bobby Martin and Aaron Shaw and Tony Tiger. 3 wonderful and very distinct artists. You see, this is a mural that includes pieces from all 3 of the artists, and it's received many favorable comments and people who've enjoyed it, not just the art itself, but also the theme behind the art. So look for a link from me tomorrow that will invite you to share this presentation with others. And as I say, please encourage them to come to the McGivney Center to see the show. Thank you again, Bobby. God bless you in all of your endeavors, and thank you once more for the gift that you've given us of
Great. Thank you,
your art
Peter.
here.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation.
God bless.
God bless you.